from the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Hey guys, good morning. Happy Monday, January 11th of the year 2021. And I know that in 2020, I said, I really do pray that 2021 will be better. Unfortunately, we're off to the races. So before we get started on today's episode, first of all, thank you for tuning in. If you're watching us live on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe, follow, and share our content. If you're listening on your favorite podcast listening platform, also please make sure to subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. That'll get us right up there in the polls. I'm happy to report that over the weekend, I got some of our rankings and we're ranked 47 in the US in technology. So that is amazing. That is all thanks to you, our valued listeners. So please make sure to continue to subscribe and share our content. We have a lot of things to talk about today, but before we do, it's Monday. And on Mondays, I like a double shot of espresso. This is, I think, my second of the day now. And I'll have one more right after our broadcast. So with that being said, I hope you join me for a quick sip of coffee. We'll get right into today's Practitioner Brief here in just a moment. All right, guys, let's get right into this here. For those watching live, you can also comment on here. I'll be able to see it and feature it. We'll be able to ask some questions. So a few things we want to talk about today. One is SolarWinds. The other one is the new Cyberspace Security Bureau that's been launched, an update on ransomware, and also we're going to address what's been going on over the last 48 to 72 hours in our country, that being the United States of America, from censoring the sitting president to deplatforming and so much more. So we'll get right, we'll also talk about that here towards the end. So let's get right into SolarWinds, where now CISA says that the threat actors behind the SolarWinds hacks also used password guessing and password spraying to breach targets and not just Trojanized updates. According to a report that was released late last week over the weekend, the new development comes as CISA said that the initial advisor on the SolarWinds incident itself, it was investigating the cases where SolarWinds hackers breached targets that didn't run the SolarWinds Orion platform. So beyond just those clients, now there's indication that there's been a lot more. CISA incident response investigations have identified that initial access in some cases were obtained by password guessing, password spraying, and inappropriately secured administrative credentials accessible via external remote access services, according to the agency. Once the threat actors gained access to internal networks or cloud infrastructure, CISA said that the hackers, believed to be of Russian in origin, escalated access to gain administrator rights and then moved to forge authenticated tokens that allowed them to access other local or cloud-hosted resources inside a network without needing to provide valid credentials or solving any MFA challenges. So CISA continues to find more information, and we're going to continue to see more information about SolarWinds as time goes by. That's normal. That's the way it should be. I hope that we see a lot more information coming in the coming days as well from other people who are dealing with it, meaning in terms of remediation and so forth. I was really hoping that with FireEye sharing and being so open as they did, that it would promote others to do the same. That's just not been the case yet. And that's a taboo that we need to get over in our industries. I can tell you that we've rebuilt some aspects of our network because of the SolarWinds incidents. We've done a bunch of threat modeling exercises in our organizations, looking at how would, the threat actors move across our network. We've looked at it from 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 12 different ways to ensure that we are securing our organization to the best of our ability. And we're thinking ahead. We're not trying to be reactive, but rather proactive. So that means a little bit more scanning, a little bit more code review, and so forth, and really trying to find different ways that we could be victims and then sharing that information out. I do that on the podcast, obviously. In other news, the U.S. State Department has approved a new cyberspace security bureau. This was announced by Secretary Pompeo this week, which is the creation of the Cyberspace Security and Emerging Technologies, also known as CSET. This was announced in 2019, kind of trying to create a cybersecurity diplomacy. The State Department actually did have someone doing this since the inception of President Trump's administration. I've actually met the person several times who was leading these efforts. He was essentially in charge of cybersecurity diplomacy across multiple nations. China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea are considered to be the U.S. threats to its national security, along with other cyber and emerging technology competitors and adversaries. The agency also notes that the challenge posed by these adversaries has increased significantly since the intent to create the CSET was announced in June of 2019. Some of the issues will include securing cyberspace and critical technologies, reducing the likelihood of a cyber conflict, which we're in the midst of right now, folks, and prevailing in a strategic cyber competition, according to the Department of State. Now, the Secretary of State has decided to establish the CSET. The agency can move forth and engage with partners and other allies. Now, what's going to be interesting is how does this all kind of come together? So we'll see that as well. An interesting story from ZDNet here about some ransomware gangs that are going after top execs to pressure companies into paying. So obviously, less people are paying ransomware, folks. Some companies are, some companies aren't. But ransomware gangs are seeing that people are just saying, you know what, screw you guys, we're not paying, simply because there's been an onslaught of ransomware gangs that have come through that were getting paid but weren't allowing for data recovery, that caused a loss of trust in this marketplace that kind of before had the trust of gentlemen, if you could say. So now the new trend is they prioritize stealing data from workstation used by top executives and managers in order to obtain what they consider juicy information that they can later use to pressure and extort the company's top brass into approving large ransomware payouts. This tactic was first learned by ZDNet earlier this week during a phone call with a company that paid a multi-million-dollar ransom to the Clop ransomware gang. Similar calls with other Clop victims and email interviews with cybersecurity firms later confirmed that this wasn't just a one-time fluke, but instead a technique that the Clop gang had fine-tuned across the past few months. I take over your CEO's computer, take over his workstation. I may have more details than just company information at that point. So it's something to really keep in mind here, guys. Ransomware gang hopes that this will help and motivate these people to really pay up. Here's the thing about paying up ransomware attacks, folks. The moment you do that, you're on the list. You're going to be targeted, and it's going to be part of your infrastructure going forward. So it's they use it. It's been used by more times, according to this article by ZDNet. That's why it's important as CISOs, as security professionals, that we layer our security. Defense in depth really means just that. Layer our security. Where are we most weak? Where are our crown jewels? And who are the individuals within our organizations that have access to these crown jewels? And who are the people that we need to protect? Very similar to physical security. If you're moving a general, that's the person you need to protect. There's going to be a bunch of decoys, a bunch of deception, a bunch of things going on. In order to keep the general secure, there's going to be layers of security from, different armored cars to over that, drones flying overhead, so much more. So, the same thing applies here. Something that's really, really important for people to look at. Now, I want to get to the really kind of the juicy part of our weekend, folks, where I think a lot of us spent a good part of our time, which is the censorship that's been going on by organizations like Twitter, that's permanently banned the president of the United States, yet allows the Ayatollah of Iran to continue to spew hate on its platform and incite violence against Israel and chants to death to America. Very interesting approach by Twitter. Here's where I'm going to come out of this. I'm not going to come with my personal stuff. Over the weekend, I've taken a lot of different text messages and calls from a lot of people who've said within my staff, within our company, that have said, hey, James, what do we do? How do we secure ourselves? What are some of the things we can, do? So a few things, guys. One, be careful what you share online. Number two, the internet has always been an ugly place. While they deplatformed the sitting president of the United States, they're not deplatforming dictators in other nations that spew hate towards our nation and our leaders, including death threats to the president. In fact, hang Mike Pence was a trending hashtag on Twitter. Here's what I'm telling all of our staff. Be careful what you do on social media. Reduce your dependency on these big organizations if you can. But this is a hypocrisy and kind of a double standard of sorts that is a bit concerning, because our First Amendment right in this nation is our freedom of speech. And like anyone, people are allowed to spew and share their opinions, right or wrong as they may be. You don't have to agree with them in order to respect those opinions. Unfortunately, that's not been the case here. We're seeing a lot of this go on, including the deplatforming of Parler from the App Store, which causes a whole other thing. So this goes kind of to what I was telling our kind of in our Slack channel over the weekend, where I said, the moment you allow people to hide, you lose control over all of it. And what's happening now is, by deplatforming these apps or these people, you're sending them to a place where they're less visible and you have less control. And as a former Intel person, let me tell you, that's not where you want these people to be, especially if you're worried about them inciting violence. So there's going to be a challenge ahead of us dealing with this stuff, folks, and I'm sure we'll get over it. This country has seen days like this, and this is just another challenge of the 21st century with technology and everything else going on. That's it for our practitioner brief here today, folks. Please make sure to subscribe and follow our podcast. You can always comment live. We bring this show live at 9 a.m. every single day on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, so you can tune in there. Until next time, folks, I'll be back tomorrow with a lot more. Until then, thanks so much for tuning in. Stay healthy, folks. Practice social distancing. Wear masks when you're around a large crowd. And most importantly, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.